Hey, happy Friday morning, everybody. In the interest of all these videos I'm making about relaying who I am, where I've been, what I'm about, whatever. I just recently created a video about my time in the Dominican Republic. This one, I am going to do a video about my time in China. So I'm going to cover why did I decide on China, where did I live, how long did I live there, what did I do while I was there. I'll try to cover the whole thing, okay? So at the time, this would have been in 2011, I was employed as a taxi driver. I owned my own taxi. That's another video. I'm going to get into it another time. But I spent my time, a lot of time, picking up fares or passengers out at the airport. And it just so happens, so leading up to all this, for the longest time, I had been putting off my desire, my dream of living overseas. I used to watch this show called House Hunters International over on TLC. It was my way of living vicariously through other people. They were buying houses in other countries, living overseas. I love The Amazing Race, the television show, because they're constantly traveling, visiting all these different countries and having a lot of fun. I needed to get it out of my system. I'm not sure it's entirely out of my system just yet, even though I live in Iowa right now. But so I really, really wanted to live overseas. Now, as I said before, my first instance of traveling overseas by myself was with the Dominican Republic. In that story, I relayed how effectively it was good for getting my feet wet, but ultimately for living overseas for a long period of time, it was a failure by all practical purposes, because it was only about 2 months in time, in length, that I lived there. So I kind of consider that a failure, because when you live overseas, you live there. You're there for months, years, not 2 months. Anyway, long story short, this passenger I picked up, he was from China. And I was talking to him, and I'm like, I'm wanting to live overseas. I want to, go and visit and live. And just like the Dominican Republic passenger that I picked up, this passenger, he sold me on China. Here's why you should go to China. So I began my research okay, so this time I had a better plan. I knew I wanted to teach English, because again, I didn't have the money to not work. So I'm like, okay, so I can teach English. So I began my research by finding a training organization that can help me get over there to teach, get me the visa and all that stuff that's required, all the paperwork, get me trained up. And so I found it was a Canadian company. I don't remember what their name is now, but something to do with sunshine or something. But anyway, so they were based up in northeastern China in a city called Harbin. And they helped line me up. Well, so they arranged for my visa. So I had to send my passport off to Chicago. They found me my first job that I will be at after training. Now, their price, believe it or not, their price was actually fairly affordable. Again, my memory's a little hazy, because it's, we're talking, the better part of 15 years ago now. But I want to say it was only about $1,200 for the whole package. So the training, not counting the flights, of course, I had to pay for my own flights, but the training, finding me my first job, they provided me a free apartment for that month that I was there in Harbin. Anyway, long story short, so I finally, I got that arranged. I got, so once I knew my start date, I got my airplane tickets. And so I flew with 2 suitcases packed to the brim, and to start my adventure overseas. In my mind, I was thinking, okay, so I'm going to probably be here. Let's shoot for 2 years. I can go from there. But in my mind, that's what I'm thinking, for 2 years. So I attend the training school in Harbin, and admittedly, I was starting out, because it's something I had never done. I wasn't very good at it. So I learned. I spent a lot of time. They even put you in real classrooms in the final couple weeks of the class, and you are supervised, of course. But they can help you. Here's where you're weak. Here's what you should do differently. Blah blah blah. Right. So finally, after the first month, that's when I went on my separate way to my new school. And then that school was the private primary school that I had previously mentioned in another video, that had age ranges from kindergarten all the way up to 12th grade. And they gave me a free apartment. Now, this city was called Taiyuan. Again, not to be confused with Taiwan. It's southwest of Beijing. It was about 4 hours by train or so. In any case, so I had my own apartment. The pay wasn't as good because, for one, it's a smaller market. They're providing you the apartment. The food was free, however, so I could eat at the school cafeteria with all the other teachers. So the food was free, the apartment was free, but I think the pay was, I want to say it was about 4,400 or 4,500 yuan per month. And if you're curious what that is in dollars, you can just, do a currency conversion on the internet. 4,400 divided by whatever the currency rate is. Anyway, it's not much in any case. But so I arrived in China for the first time. That would have been on August 19th. I got to the school on September 18th, I believe, to the school in Taiyuan. And I was at that school basically then from September through late, it was pretty late May, like in the last week or so, week and a half of May. And then that's when the school ended, or the school year ended. I admittedly got a little bit of a late start. Obviously, the school year had already started in like August. So I got there in September. But they were probably just happy to have me, Now, in all of this teaching, so I taught at the 6th grade level and at the high school level. And I mostly had the 6th grade classes, but I had about 4 or 5 of the high school classes. And in all of this, you are literally, you're just interacting. You're not getting too deep on English. You're not conjunctive pronouns and past participles. And you're not doing any of that. You're just interacting. You're talking to them. You're trying to create a sort of English language immersion environment, a real world environment. I'm interacting with them. I'm asking them what they like, what they do, whatever we might have discussed. So none of this is that difficult. I was prepared for it. I had to adapt and improvise on games to keep the classes interested. Anyway, at the conclusion of that year, what should have been a fairly simple process. So I was trying to get my work visa renewed. And the school that was back up in Harbin that helped get my visa arranged, they were not cooperating with me in giving me the documents I needed to get my work visa renewed. I think it seems obvious, maybe in retrospect, that they probably bribed somebody in Harbin to issue all this paperwork. And unfortunately, they didn't want to be found out by giving me the paperwork in Beijing, or I'm sorry, in Taiyuan. So long story short, I met with no cooperation on their end. So I did have to fly to Hong Kong to get my visa renewed from a work visa to a tourist visa, which now means I'm working illegally, technically, right? And that brings its own whole host of problems. So anyway, long story short, at the conclusion of that school year, I decided to pursue higher paying jobs in Beijing. So I traveled to Beijing for a few days on my own and looked for jobs. And that was the first primary importance. I was more interested in jobs. I rented a room at a little, what they call a hutong, which is like one of those, a hutong is like one of those neighborhoods with the really small alleyways between rows of buildings. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen them in movies and on videos and things. But anyway, so I rented a hutong hotel and looked for jobs. I did find one. So the first job I found was at a kindergarten just southeast of Beijing that paid pretty well. It was about 16,000 yuan per month. I was there from, it would have been June of 2012 through, I believe, either very late February or early March of 2013, probably more like February. I ran into some issues with that school. And I was effectively released, terminated, fired, whatever you want to call it. Long story short, the owners of that school apparently ended up, they stole a bunch of, they kept a bunch of the money paid for by the parents for their children's kindergarten tuition, but they fled with all the money. Don't know whatever happened with them. I'm sure they got arrested. Anyway, so now I had to find a new job. So this time I found a job on Craigslist in Beijing, and it was for a school up on kind of the northeast end of Beijing in what they call the Chaoyang district. And that is where I found my absolute best success in schools. So I started at that school. That would have been in March of 2012. And I literally stayed at that school until July 31st of 2015. So I was there almost 2.5 years, about 2.5 years at that school. Absolutely loved it. It was probably some of the greatest times and memories that I've had. The pay started out a little bit lower than that other kindergarten that the first one where I didn't fulfill a full school year, but the new one started me, I believe it was like 12,500 a month. But then they quickly jacked it up to, I believe, I want to say they did 13,500. Then I even got a few more pay bumps. By the time I left there, I was at 15,000 a month. Again, this is yuan, not US dollars, so don't freak out. But anyway, but that was the school that I wished to become a principal at. I wished to become an administrator of sorts. I wanted to interact with the parents. I didn't want to continue teaching. I was getting kind of tired of it. It was hard. It's hard work. You're constantly lesson planning. And unfortunately, I eventually ended up leaving China. So I left that school in July of 2015, and I came back to the United States in October 2015. I had one more job in there, but it's not really worth talking about, truthfully. But in any case, my time in China, I did lots of traveling. I had lots of good memories. I made lots of friends. I do miss it, but I don't miss the teaching. And so in total, I was there just over the 4-year mark. It was like, what, 4 years, 2 months or so? Not even quite 2 months. But that was my time in China. And next week, I have another story I'll put out on Monday of something I did while I was in China, and that will be the new video coming on Monday. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I know these videos are kind of long, but I'm just trying to spit out all the memories that I have. I can't recount everything, otherwise this video would be like hours long. I just had a lot of good times. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I fell in love with the children that I taught. Met good people and friends. Ate lots of delicious food. But anyway, with that, if you have any questions about my time in China, what I saw, what I did, please do not hesitate to leave a comment below. Please like this video. Please subscribe if you found any value in it. I would be very grateful. Having said that, I have a few more shorts coming out today. And then I hope you all have a nice weekend. So with that being said, everybody take care, okay? Bye-bye.